Wherever there's war, death inevitably follows. The soul-harvesting spectre, a symbol of our own mortality, is traditionally the villain of the show, be it in a quite literal sense as Dracula's second-in-command in the Castlevania series, or in his figurative guise as the bane of every Call of Duty player. Not so in Darksiders II, where the skeletal horseman of the apocalypse takes centre stage, looking every bit the protein-shake drinker and sporting a beautiful mane of raven black hair. As fans of the original game will probably have already surmised, the opening statement wasn't a limp attempt at profundity. Death is the elder brother of war, the walking tank accused of triggering the apocalypse earlier than planned. In Darksiders 2, we join Death in the intervening century between the fall of man and war's return to Earth as the Pale Rider attempts to clear his sibling's name. If you had to summarise the key difference between war's adventure and Death's in one word, that word would be choice. Where Darksiders was a loving patchwork of Zelda's time-honoured dungeon exploration and God of War's chunky combat, Darksiders 2 is that plus the randomised loot dropping of Diablo and its many imitators, plus the customisable skills and time-devouring side quests you'd expect from Fallout or Skyrim. So yes, there's still a beginning, middle and end, but how you progress through that middle and reach that end now rests on what sort of death you fancy manhandling. For starters, you can use gathered experience to bless Skullface with new abilities that fit into one or two categories. Harbinger is focused on boosting his melee might, and Necromancer turns him into a zombie summoning wizard. Then you have 3 armor classes to contend with, which each focus on boosting different attributes, and finally you can determine his favoured weaponry depending on how you prefer to smack stuff up. Death may not be the most traditional looking interpretation of everyone's favourite personification of our inevitable demise, but he's still armed with his trusty scythe, also known as the Harvester, or as Death secretly calls it, Debbie. You can opt to wield it in true Reaper fashion as a single polearm, or divide it into 2 smaller scythes for faster, weaker combos. It doesn't end there though, there's also a pool of secondary weapon types from pistols and claws to stupidly large hammers, and, in the vein of Borderlands, there are reportedly hundreds of variants of each for you to discover, and not necessarily in the same order as any other player. You can add the most recent take of Prince of Persia to that swelling list of influences too, as Death is a far more agile and athletic character than War. He catches up with us all eventually after all, so it makes sense that he's the nimble sort. Death's nippy nature is reflected in combat, where dodging between enemy attacks is your only method of defence, and when exploring this vast new world, as wall running, ledge climbing and pillar shimmying become essential parts of your navigational repertoire. Aiding Death on both fronts is the Ghost Hand, a versatile ethereal grapple hook that allows him to latch onto out-of-reach grab points, enemies and movable objects. It's also fantastic for itchy backs and changing the channel on the telly when you've lost the remote. How effectively all of this knits together remains to be seen. The first game, which we're big fans of, adhered tightly to the structure of the games that influenced it, resulting in a similarly taut experience. With that in mind, Darksiders 2's broader scope and increased freedom could be seen as a risky move, but from the hands-off demo we've witnessed, we're quite looking forward to snuggling into Death's cold embrace when it hits Xbox 360 this summer.